The American Revolution had a secret, not the kind kept in a locked room or a coded letter, the kind hiding in plain sight. For 6 years, George Washington fought the most powerful military on earth, with an army that was starving, freezing, deserting, and losing. And somehow, improbably, impossibly, he won. History gives the credit to Washington, to Jefferson, to Franklin, for the founding fathers whose faces are on the money and the monuments. But there was someone else, someone who was not American, who had no obligation to fight, who defied his own king to cross an ocean for a cause that was not his. Someone without whom the French fleet never blocks the Chesapeake Bay, the trap at Yorktown never closes, and the revolution that created the most powerful nation in human history quietly dies in a Pennsylvania winter. His name was Lafayette, and America has never fully paid its debt to him. To understand what Lafayette did for the American Revolution, you first have to understand what the American Revolution looked like from the outside in 1777. It did not look like a victory in the making. It looked like a disaster. George Washington's Continental Army had just lost New York. It had lost the Battle of Brandywine. It had lost Philadelphia, the largest city in the colonies, and the seat of the Continental Congress. The Congress itself had fled. The army was retreating, hungry, undersupplied, and hemorrhaging men who decided the cause was not worth dying for in the Pennsylvania winter. In Europe, the revolution was being watched with a mixture of fascination and skepticism. The idea that a collection of colonial militias and a barely formed regular army could defeat the most disciplined professional military force on earth, the British Army, seemed, to most informed European observers, genuinely unlikely. France, which had its own long and bitter history of military conflict with Britain, was cautiously interested in the American cause. A weakened Britain was always in France's interest, but the French government was not yet ready to commit to open alliance with a rebellion that might collapse before the ink on any treaty dried. Into this atmosphere of cautious European watching and American military crisis walked a 20-year-old French aristocrat with more money than military experience, more idealism than battlefield sense, and an absolute conviction that the American cause was worth crossing an ocean for. His name was the Marquis de Lafayette, and he was about to change everything. Marie-Joseph Paul-Yves Roch Gilbert Dumotier, the Marquis de Lafayette, was born on September 6, 1757, in the Chavagnac Castle in the Auvergne region of south-central France. Yes, that is his full name. The French aristocracy believed that names, like estates, should be inherited in their entirety. We will call him Lafayette. His family had deep military roots running back generations. His father, a colonel in the French Grenadiers, was killed by a British cannonball at the Battle of Minden in 1759, when Lafayette was just 2 years old. His mother died when he was 13. By the time Lafayette entered his teenage years, he was an orphan sitting on top of one of the largest fortunes in France, an inheritance worth several $1 million in today's terms, accumulated across generations of aristocratic land and title. He was one of the wealthiest young men in all of France. He was also, by most accounts of people who knew him at the time, awkward, earnest, and slightly out of place in the gilded world of Versailles court life. He loved to dance, but was bad at it. He was sincere in a world that prized irony. He believed things deeply in a society where deep belief was considered slightly embarrassing. At 14, he enrolled in the Royal Military Academy at Versailles. At 16, he was commissioned as an officer in the Noailles Dragoons. At 17, he married Adrienne de Noailles, from one of the most powerful noble families in France, a match arranged by the families that turned out, surprisingly, to be a genuinely loving partnership. He was young, Rich, married well, and completely set up for a comfortable life of minor military service and Versailles social events that would never require him to do anything particularly dangerous or meaningful. Then, in August of 1775, he attended a dinner that changed his life. The dinner was hosted by the Duke of Gloucester, brother of King George III of Britain. The Duke, who had his own political disagreements with his brother's government, spoke openly about the rebellion happening in the American colonies. He talked about the colonists' grievances. He talked about the arguments for liberty and self-governance that were circulating through Philadelphia and Boston and being read across the Atlantic. Lafayette was 18 years old. He sat at that dinner and absorbed every word. Something clicked into place that evening that never came unclicked. The ideas being discussed, that ordinary people had the right to govern themselves, that liberty was not merely a philosophical concept, but a practical political demand, that a people could and should resist a government that treated them as subjects to be managed, rather than citizens to be represented. These ideas landed in Lafayette with the force of a revelation. He was not a political theorist, he was not a philosopher. He was a young soldier from a military family who had grown up hearing about the British cannonball that killed his father. And suddenly there was a war, on the other side of the ocean, against the people who had fired that cannonball. A war being fought for ideas he believed in with the full sincerity that the Versailles court found slightly embarrassing. He decided he was going. The French government said no. King Louis XVI explicitly forbade French officers from joining the American cause, not wanting to provoke an open confrontation with Britain before France was ready for it. Lafayette's father-in-law, the powerful Duc de Noailles, forbade it. Orders were issued preventing his departure. Lafayette bought a ship. He named it La Victoire, Victory. He loaded it with supplies and weapons for the American army at his own personal expense. He disguised his departure, evading French authorities who had been ordered to stop him. He crossed the Atlantic in a 54-day voyage that was, by all accounts, deeply unpleasant. He arrived in South Carolina in June of 1777. He was 19 years old. He had no combat experience. He spoke almost no English. He had just defied the explicit orders of his king, his government, and his family to join a war that most of Europe thought the Americans were going to lose. Nobody in the Continental Army quite knew what to do with him. The Continental Congress had a problem with European volunteers. The problem was that there were too many of them, and most of them were useless. Unemployed European officers had been showing up in Philadelphia for months, each one carrying letters of recommendation, each one demanding a rank commensurate with their supposed military genius, each one expecting to be immediately given command of significant forces. Congress had been burned repeatedly. It had granted generals' commissions to men who turned out to have greatly embellished their credentials and who struggled to communicate with troops who did not speak their language. When Lafayette arrived, Congress was in no mood for another ambitious European officer with grand expectations. Lafayette understood the situation immediately. He made an offer that Congress had never heard before. He asked for nothing. No salary, no guaranteed rank. He would serve as a volunteer, at his own expense, and ask only to be given the chance to prove himself before being entrusted with actual command. He wrote to Congress with characteristic directness. He wanted to learn, not to be given authority he had not earned. Congress, stunned by the novelty of a wealthy European aristocrat asking for less rather than more, made him a major general, but without troops to command initially, a courtesy rank that acknowledged his social standing while leaving the question of actual battlefield authority for later. Then he met George Washington. The relationship between George Washington and Lafayette is one of the most important and least understood relationships of the American Revolution. Washington was 45 years old when they met. He was a Virginia planter, a veteran of the French and Indian War, a man of considerable personal authority and enormous personal burdens. He was trying to hold together an army that kept shrinking, a Congress that kept second-guessing him, and an alliance with France that was not yet formalized but desperately needed. Lafayette was 19. He was French, idealistic, and determined to prove something. What developed between them was not a simple mentorship or a political alliance. It was something closer to the relationship Washington had never quite had, the relationship of a father and a son. Washington had no children of his own. Lafayette had lost his father before he could remember him. Neither man said this explicitly in the early days, but the letters between them over the following years make it unmistakable. Washington initially assigned Lafayette to his personal staff as an observer, a role that kept him close enough to learn and far enough from actual command that a mistake would not be catastrophic. Lafayette spent weeks watching Washington manage the impossible logistics of the Continental Army, the supply problems, the desertion rates, the political pressures from Congress, the constant need to maintain the appearance of confidence when the actual military situation was frequently dire. What Lafayette saw was a man of almost superhuman steadiness. Washington was not the most brilliant battlefield tactician of the Revolution. He lost more battles than he won, but he had something that Lafayette immediately recognized and immediately began to absorb. He had the ability to hold a cause together through sheer force of personal authority and unbreakable patience when the cause itself seemed to be falling apart. Lafayette was wounded at the Battle of Brandywine in September of 1777, just a few months after arriving in America. A British musket ball passed through his leg. He kept his men in order and oversaw an organized retreat before anyone insisted he receive medical attention. Washington, who had watched the young Frenchman's conduct under fire, wrote afterward that Lafayette had behaved with great bravery and exactly the kind of judgment that earned trust. The courtesy rank was about to become something real. Valleyforge happened that winter. Lafayette was there. He endured the same frozen Pennsylvania misery as the rest of the Continental Army. The starvation, the disease, the men dying from exposure, the wholesale desertions that reduced Washington's force by thousands. He did not go home. He did not use his wealth and his connections to find comfortable quarters in Philadelphia. He stayed. And he did something else at Valleyforge that mattered as much as his physical presence. He wrote letters home to France. Lafayette's letters from Valleyforge to his contacts in the French government and aristocracy were not reports of disaster. They were carefully constructed arguments for why France should commit to the American cause. He described the determination of the soldiers who stayed. He described Washington's leadership. He framed the American situation not as a failing rebellion, but as a genuine war of principles being fought by men who would not quit, regardless of the conditions. These letters were read. They were discussed. They contributed to a shifting French calculation about whether the Americans were worth fully backing. In February of 1778, France formally entered the war as an American ally. The Treaty of Alliance committed French military and naval power to the American cause. This was the single most important diplomatic development of the entire Revolution. It transformed a colonial rebellion against the British Empire into a war that Britain now had to fight on multiple fronts against one of Europe's great powers. Lafayette did not single-handedly produce that alliance. Benjamin Franklin in Paris deserves enormous credit, as do the French Foreign Minister Vergennes and the American military victories at Saratoga that convinced France the Americans could actually fight. But Lafayette's letters, his presence in America, and his personal relationships in French aristocratic and governmental circles were a meaningful thread in the diplomatic fabric that produced the alliance. He had crossed an ocean to join a war. He had helped turn that war into something France was willing to fight. By 1778, Lafayette was no longer an observer. He was a commander. Washington gave him an independent command in New Jersey, tasking him with assessing British positions around Philadelphia after the British withdrawal. Lafayette conducted the assignment with exactly the careful competence that had earned Washington's trust, gathering intelligence, managing his forces, and extracting his command from a dangerous position at Barren Hill when British forces moved to trap him, outmaneuvering a superior force through quick thinking and knowledge of the terrain. He was 20 years old and performing at a level that most professional European officers, twice his age, would have found challenging. In 1779, Lafayette returned to France on leave. He was received as a hero. The awkward young aristocrat who had defied his king and his family to cross the Atlantic was now the living embodiment of the Franco-American alliance. He was celebrated in Versailles. He met with the king. He lobbied aggressively for increased French military and financial support for the American cause, and he was successful. When he sailed back to America in 1780, he brought with him the news that a French expeditionary force under the Comte de Rochambeau, 6,000 regular French troops, would be coming to fight alongside Washington. He had gone home a volunteer who had defied his government. He came back a diplomat who had moved it. The final chapter of Lafayette's role in the Revolution played out in Virginia in 1781. The British had opened a major campaign in the American South, and Virginia had become a critical theater. Benedict Arnold, now fighting for the British after his infamous treason, had been raiding Virginia with devastating effect. Then the British sent their most capable operational commander, General Cornwallis, to Virginia with a large force. Washington sent Lafayette to Virginia to hold the situation together with a force that was smaller, less experienced, and less equipped than what Cornwallis commanded. Lafayette's assignment was not to defeat Cornwallis, it was to contain him, to keep him from being able to operate freely, to deny him the decisive engagement he sought, and to keep the British forces tied to Virginia until Washington and Rochambeau could bring their combined forces south. What followed over the summer of 1781 was a masterclass in strategic patience and tactical mobility that would have impressed commanders twice Lafayette's age and experience. Lafayette refused to let Cornwallis draw him into a pitched battle on unfavorable terms. He moved constantly, gathering recruits, gathering supplies, maintaining enough pressure to keep the British occupied, while never committing to an engagement he could not win. Cornwallis, frustrated, made the dismissive remark that the boy cannot escape me, referring to Lafayette. The boy was 23 years old and running rings around him. When Cornwallis eventually pulled back toward the Virginia coast and established his base at Yorktown, Lafayette immediately recognized what was happening and sent word to Washington. He positioned his force to block Cornwallis's retreat while Washington and Rochambeau marched south, covering 300 miles in under a month, and the French fleet under Admiral de Grasse sailed to block the Chesapeake. The trap was set. Lafayette had held the door open long enough for everyone else to walk through it. The siege of Yorktown lasted from September 28th to October 19th, 1781. Lafayette commanded one of the 3 divisions of the Allied force. On the night of October 14th, he directed one of the siege's most critical actions, a nighttime assault on British Redoubt No. 9, a fortified position that had to be taken to allow the Allied artillery to advance their lines close enough to make Cornwallis's position untenable. The attack was conducted with unloaded muskets and bayonets in the dark, the same tactic that Steuben had drilled into the Continental Army at Valley Forge 3 years earlier. The men scaled the walls of the redoubt and overwhelmed its defenders in a matter of minutes. Within 4 days of that assault, Cornwallis asked for terms. On October 19, 1781, the British army at Yorktown marched out to surrender. 8,000 British soldiers, the largest British surrender of the entire war. Cornwallis himself claimed illness and did not attend, sending a subordinate in his place. Washington, unwilling to accept the insult of a stand-in, sent his own subordinate to receive the surrender. Lafayette was 24 years old and standing in the field at Yorktown, watching the army that had killed his father's generation lay down its weapons. The American Revolution was effectively over. What Lafayette actually changed is worth stating clearly, because it is easy to let his story become simply a tale of personal courage and romantic idealism without understanding the structural difference he made. When Lafayette arrived in America in 1777, the revolution had no formal European ally. France was watching but not committed. Without French military and naval power, the Americans had no answer to British naval superiority and no way to bring British military forces to a decisive, contained engagement. The revolution might have continued for years as a grinding guerrilla war, or it might have simply exhausted itself and collapsed. Lafayette's presence in America, his letters from Valley Forge, his personal credibility as a French aristocrat with court connections, his military conduct that gave French observers reason to believe the Americans could actually fight, all of it contributed to the French decision to fully commit to the alliance that made Yorktown possible. The French fleet at Chesapeake Bay was what made the Yorktown trap possible. Without Admiral de Grasse blocking the bay, Cornwallis could simply have been evacuated by the British Navy, as he had been threatened and attempted to do. The trap only worked because the French Navy was there. And the French Navy was there because France had committed to the alliance. And the alliance had been built, piece by piece, partly by the letters and lobbying and personal reputation of a 19-year-old French volunteer who had bought his own ship and crossed the Atlantic because he believed in an idea. No Lafayette, no alliance. No alliance, no Yorktown. No Yorktown in 1781. And the history of what comes next becomes very different. Lafayette returned to France after the Revolution and spent the rest of his life carrying the ideas he had fought for in America back into European politics. He commanded the National Guard during the French Revolution. He drafted the Declaration of the Rights of Man. He spent years in an Austrian prison for refusing to abandon his principles. He returned to America in 1824 for a triumphant farewell tour, greeted in every city as a living embodiment of what the Revolution had meant. He died in Paris in 1834 at the age of 76. By his request, he was buried under soil he had brought from Bunker Hill. French soil, American earth, the two things he had spent his life trying to hold together in the same place. George Washington called him the man I love. That sentence, from a man not given to easy sentiment, in a letter to a 23-year-old French aristocrat who had crossed an ocean to fight in someone else's war, tells you almost everything you need to know about what Lafayette meant to the people who watched him do it. He was not the greatest general of the American Revolution. He was not its most important political thinker. He was not the diplomat who negotiated the French alliance, or the drill master who trained the Continental Army. He was something else, something that the Revolution needed and almost did not have. He was the proof, visible to the French government and the French public and the French military, that the American cause was worth fighting for, that it was not merely a colonial tax dispute, but an idea serious enough that a wealthy young Frenchman would cross an ocean, defy his king, sleep in the snow at Valley Forge, and spend 6 years of his life on it. Sometimes the most important thing a person can do in a war is not win a battle. Sometimes it is show up, stay, and make the people watching from a distance decide that what they are watching is worth joining. Lafayette showed up. And because he did, the people who could actually change the outcome of the war decided to show up too. If this story changed how you think about the American Revolution, hit subscribe and drop a comment below. What do you think? Does America win without France? And does France commit without Lafayette? The answer to both questions might surprise you. And if you learned something today, smash that like button so more people can find this channel.